The morning air felt sharper than usual, carrying with it the hum of the city's ambition and the unspoken tension that followed her steps. She clutched her folder, the corners worn soft from nights spent rehearsing answers and double-checking numbers that made sense in every universe, except the one ruled by prejudice. Inside the bank, the air was cool, almost sterile, humming faintly with a kind of order that never had space for her kind of hope. When she spoke of her dream, a wellness cafe that would anchor her neighborhood, laughter cut through her words before they had the chance to breathe. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of laughter that builds walls. Her pulse steadied, her eyes stayed level. She thanked him anyway, gathered her papers with hands that didn't shake, and walked out into the sunlight where dignity refused to die. The world kept moving, but something in her shifted. A promise sealed in silence that she would return not as a borrower, but as an owner. The door closed behind her like a verdict, its glass reflecting the world she was not meant to enter. The noise of the city felt distant, muffled by the pulse of her own heartbeat. She walked without direction, each step measured, each breath an effort to hold together the shards of dignity left intact. The folder pressed against her chest was heavier now. Not with rejection, but with the echo of laughter that refused to fade. Passing a street mural of women with raised fists, she paused, her eyes tracing their defiance. For a moment she saw herself among them, not defeated, but redefined. The air shifted. Somewhere deep inside, humiliation folded itself into something stronger. She whispered a vow only the wind could hear, and in that silence, the first seed of revenge began to take root. The evening found her in the quiet of her small apartment, blinds half closed, the glow of the setting sun spilling across spreadsheets, scattered like broken promises. The laughter still echoed faintly, but now it mingled with the low hum of determination. She opened her laptop, numbers cascading before her eyes like puzzle pieces, rearranging themselves into a plan. The city outside murmured. Car horns, sirens, a heartbeat made of survival. She sipped black coffee gone cold, whispering calculations into the silence, her voice steadying with each sum. Every rejection she'd ever faced, every job overlooked, every door closed, became currency for something greater. Somewhere beyond the walls of that apartment, opportunity was hiding, waiting to be found. The next day brought with it the sound of resilience. The hum of a community market filled the morning air. Laughter, vendors calling out prices, children running between stalls. She moved through the crowd unnoticed, her mind still replaying the insult, her heart replaying her purpose. Among rows of fresh produce and handmade crafts, she found Mrs. Lena Carter, the woman who had raised generations on wisdom and warnings. They sat together under a faded tent, the air thick with the scent of sweet grass and roasted peanuts. Mrs. Carter spoke softly, her voice like a hymn, reminding her that pride can't pay bills, but it can light the way. In that moment, Nia remembered who she was, and more importantly, who she came from. Night descended slow and deliberate, the city lights flickering on like small acts of defiance. She returned home with Mrs. Carter's words echoing through her. If they want, open the door, buy the building. The phrase looped in her mind until it became mantra. She stood before her window, the bank tower visible in the distance, glowing cold and untouchable against the dark. Her reflection merged with its silhouette, one woman against a skyline of giants. She didn't know yet how she would do it, only that she must. The laughter had done its damage, but it had also done its work. And from the ashes of humiliation, her blueprint for power began to form. Morning returned without mercy, but with purpose. The sunlight poured through her blinds like an invitation to rise, and for once she accepted it without hesitation. The humiliation had burned itself into clarity, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that rebuilds. She spent hours reading, scrolling through articles, tracing the threads of ownership that tied power to property and profit. Each discovery carved away her doubt, revealing a hunger she'd long hidden beneath politeness. The coffee grew cold beside her again, but she didn't notice. She was busy unlearning everything they'd taught her about permission. Later that week, she sat in the corner of a local cafe. Not hers yet, but the kind she envisioned. The scent of roasted beans filled the air as conversations around her merged into a soft hum of ambition and exhaustion. Across the room, she watched people like her. Dreamers, builders, survivors, each carving their own path through walls unseen. She jotted figures into her notebook, small calculations that would one day amount to something seismic. For the first time since the laughter, she smiled without forcing it. The dream had survived the fire. When Mrs. Lena Carter called, her voice carried the same rhythm as prayer. Slow, deliberate, steady. She listened as the elders spoke about land, ownership, and the difference between surviving and building. The words felt like soil under her feet, grounding her. Start small. Mrs. Carter had said, learn the system they built to keep you out. That night, Naya drafted her first plan, a step-by-step outline for independence that no banker could laugh away. Each line on the page was a reclamation of power, each number a declaration of self-worth. By the end of the month, she was spending nights at the local library, studying business law and real estate codes that once seemed written in a language not meant for her. The words began to make sense now. The loopholes, the leverage, the quiet ways power was passed from hand to hand. Sometimes exhaustion whispered for her to stop, but then she'd remember that laugh, that sharp, dismissive sound, and push deeper into the pages. Every highlight she made felt like a victory, every fact a brick in her unseen foundation. The spark became flame the day she met Malik Johnson. He was not a savior, just another fighter who recognized the fire in her eyes. Their meeting wasn't planned. Destiny often prefers casual introductions. Over coffee and conversation, he spoke of strategy, of legal angles and investment structures. She listened, her mind racing ahead to the possibilities. When he asked what she wanted most, she answered without hesitation. To own what they said I couldn't. He nodded slowly, understanding more than her words could hold. The partnership began with that single truth. Days turned into weeks of disciplined obsession. What had begun as survival was now a study in strategy. Nia filled her apartment walls with charts and sticky notes, webs of data linking banks, owners, and property deeds like constellations of control. Malik's voice echoed through her thoughts. The system runs on patterns. Learn them, and you'll see where it cracks. She stopped sleeping at regular hours, the night becoming her classroom in silence her teacher. She no longer feared the institution that mocked her. She studied it. Every click, every signature, every policy was a piece of a fortress she was learning to infiltrate. When she and Malik met again, the plan took on structure. They sat over blueprints of opportunity. The legal kind, hidden in corporate filings and quiet debt. Malik explained how certain commercial properties were under-leveraged, including the bank's building itself. The irony almost made her laugh. She listened, pen poised, capturing each word with surgical precision. The humiliation that once silenced her now guided her clarity. The enemy had exposed its weakness the day it underestimated her. Now, she was learning how to buy the very ground it stood on. The discovery came by accident, a notice buried deep in an online database. The bank's parent company was restructuring, its debts quietly spreading through subsidiary holdings. It was the kind of information people ignored unless they knew where to look. She smiled for the first time in weeks, a quiet, knowing smile. Power, she realized, wasn't taken all at once. It was collected piece by piece. The same way humiliation had been collected over a lifetime, she was now collecting opportunity. Each paper trail was a pathway, each loophole an invitation. She and Malik began forming a quiet alliance, a small network of local investors and business owners who believed in community, over greed. They met discreetly in coffee shops and small offices, each meeting layering trust over strategy. She spoke less now, letting her confidence speak for her. The plan wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the rules. The same building that once denied her would soon house her dream, but this time it would belong to her and the people it once excluded. The seed had become a map. By the end of that month, her plan was complete. A web of precision hidden beneath humility. She knew exactly what to do, and more importantly, when to do it. Malik reviewed the paperwork one final time, his eyes flicking over the contracts with quiet approval. "This could work," he said, voice low but certain. She nodded. The laughter that once echoed in her ears was now a distant hum, replaced by the rhythm of her own preparation. Somewhere across town, the bank manager slept peacefully, unaware that the ground beneath his office was already shifting. The work began in silence, no announcements or applause, just motion. She woke before dawn, reviewing listings, driving across neighborhoods that others had written off. Boarded windows, cracked sidewalks, and overgrown lawns no longer looked like ruin to her. They looked like potential. The first property she bought was small, a forgotten duplex tucked between abandoned homes. But when she stood inside among peeling paint and dust, she saw a beginning. The scent of decay didn't discourage her. It reminded her how beauty hides in overlooked places. She rolled up her sleeves, determination tightening her jaw. The woman who once asked for permission was now writing her own contract with the future. Weeks turned into a rhythm. Hammer, paint, budget, repeat. She learned the language of renovation through trial and error. Her hands blistered, her savings stretched thin. Malik checked in often, offering legal advice and occasional laughter to cut through exhaustion. Each completed project added weight to her portfolio and proof to her resolve. The numbers began to align like constellations she had once only dreamed of connecting. The laughter from that bank echoed still, but now it served as her metronome, keeping her pace steady. She wasn't just fixing walls, she was reconstructing power. By the third property, investors began calling her, not the other way around. Word spread quietly about the woman turning forgotten spaces into thriving homes. Each conversation was handled with the same poise she once took into that bank, but now the power dynamics had shifted. She negotiated like a strategist, every clause a reflection of her discipline. Money flowed differently when it met integrity. It multiplied. At night, she allowed herself brief moments of pride before diving back into spreadsheets and calls. Progress wasn't loud. It was steady, methodical, unstoppable. There were setbacks, unexpected repairs, deceitful contractors, deals that fell through. But failure no longer frightened her. It educated her. She learned how to pivot quickly, to balance vision with pragmatism. "Mrs. Carter's voice guided her through each disappointment. Don't fight the storm. Build through it." Some nights she'd drive through the neighborhoods she was transforming, watching lights flicker on in houses that had once been silent. Those small illuminations became her reward, proof that progress, like healing, takes root quietly before it shines. Months later, Malik called with news that changed everything. The bank's corporate ownership had shifted again, and a partial stake in the building, that building, was listed for sale under a holding firm. Nia sat motionless, heart pounding with recognition. The irony felt divine. All her grind, all her sacrifice, had led her back to the beginning. But this time, she was ready. The same structure that once symbolized denial now beckoned as opportunity. She smiled, not out of revenge but alignment. The circle was closing perfectly. The purchase began quietly. Papers signed under a company name that carried no trace of her identity. Malik handled the filings with precision, every signature a chess move. The thrill was not in the act of revenge, but in its elegance. Power, she'd learned it, didn't need to announce itself. The same corridors that once echoed with laughter would soon host her footsteps. As she watched the transaction finalize on Malik's laptop, A slow, knowing calm settled over her. The game had changed. The woman they dismissed as a dreamer was now the shadow in their boardroom. Ownership was quiet. Not a sound, not a shout, just the soft exhale of justice taking its place. The deed arrived by courier, plain envelope, plain font, extraordinary meaning. She held it the way one might hold a newborn dream. Gently, reverently, as though any sudden movement could break the moment's grace. She ran her fingers across her name printed on the page and whispered a silent thank you to every door that had once closed in her face. For the first time, she understood what it meant to own not just property, but power. She visited the building days later, stepping once more into its cold marble floors, but now as its silent landlord. The same staff nodded politely, unaware of the shift beneath their feet. Every echo of her heels across that polished floor sounded like poetry written in footsteps. She passed the desk where humiliation had once lived, breathing in the same sterile air, only now it smelled like victory. The world hadn't changed, but her position in it had. That was enough. She didn't need him to know yet. Power waited best in silence. When Malik finally told her that the bank manager would be notified of the ownership change, she didn't flinch. Instead, she adjusted her blazer and said only, "Schedule it." She wasn't driven by anger anymore. That part had burned away, leaving only purpose. Power without grace was just ego. And she refused to mirror what had once belittled her. The meeting would be her closure, not her confrontation. Every triumph, she realized, was less about revenge and more about restoration, of dignity, of justice, of balance. The call came at noon. The transfer was official. She was now the legal owner of the building that once denied her. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared out her window as sunlight caught the edges of the city. The laughter she once heard seemed far away, softened by time and triumph. She smiled, not because she'd proven them wrong, but because she'd proven herself right. Justice, she thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply arrives, steady as sunrise. The day of revelation began like any other, sun sharp against the glass towers, the city humming in expectation. But for her, it was a day written long ago in silence. She dressed without haste, each motion deliberate. The fastening of her cufflinks, the steady glide of her blazer across her shoulders, the final exhale before history reversed itself. The world outside bustled, unaware of what was about to unfold. There were no grand speeches to prepare, no need for vengeance. Just truth, finally unwrapped. And as she stepped out into the bright Atlanta morning, her reflection in the car window looked back at her, composed, unshaken, and entirely new. She arrived at the bank with the same grace she had the day she was dismissed, only now the air bent differently around her. Familiar marble floors stretched beneath her heels, the soft echo of her steps carrying an invisible authority. The same receptionist who once avoided her gaze now smiled politely, unaware of who stood before her. Nia thanked her and walked deeper inside. She noticed details she hadn't before. The faint hum of air conditioning, the rhythmic clack of keyboards, the scent of polished steel. The institution looked unchanged, yet it felt smaller now, like a monument built on the myth of power she had quietly rewritten. When she entered Walter's office, he looked up, puzzled, recognition dawning too slowly to be safe. His smirk faltered just enough for satisfaction to flicker through her composure. "You look familiar," he began, his tone unsure, his confidence cracking like glass under pressure. She smiled, took a seat, and placed a folder on his desk. Inside it lay the deed, the truth he had unknowingly served beneath for months. Silence filled the space, heavy and cleansing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Power wasn't in the volume of the reveal, but in the calm that followed. His eyes widened as he read. And for the first time, he said nothing. He stammered something about misunderstanding, about process and protocol, but the words dissolved before they reached her. She listened quietly, not out of mercy, but Master. Then, with gentle clarity, she stood, gathered her folder, and said the only thing that mattered. You work for me now. It wasn't anger. It was equilibrium. Justice at last had taken its rightful seat. She turned toward the door, pausing only to take in the room that had once humiliated her. The same air that once suffocated her now filled her lungs like freedom. Outside, the city breathed differently. She stood on the same sidewalk where she'd once clutched her rejection, now holding possibility itself. People walked past, unaware that history had shifted in quiet symmetry. Across the street, the mirrored glass of the bank reflected her image, not as the woman turned away, but as the one who had returned in triumph. She didn't smile this time. The moment was too sacred for pride. She simply nodded once, as if acknowledging the reflection of every woman who'd ever been underestimated. The air was warm, the sky wide, and the story finally hers. Transformation didn't happen overnight. It unfolded like morning light creeping through an open window. The old bank building, once sterile and cold, began to pulse with new life. She watched as architects, artists, and community builders turned marble corridors into gathering spaces, sterile offices into classrooms, and the lobby into a heartbeat of purpose. Every nail, every brushstroke was a declaration that ownership could look like care. The past still lingered in the walls, but now it hummed differently, like an echo repurposed into music. Weeks later, the doors opened to the public for the first time. Families walked in, wide-eyed and amazed at what had replaced the symbol of rejection. The first floor thrummed with laughter and music, the air scented with roasted beans and cinnamon. Her cafe at last. Upstairs, rooms buzzed with financial literacy workshops and mentorship sessions. Children darted between tables, their joy echoing off the once silent walls. She moved quietly among them, her heart swelling not with pride, but with peace. This was more than a building, it was a rebirth. As months passed, the top floors became a hub of empowerment. Seminars, networking nights, and startup incubators led by the same people once denied access. Malik often stopped by, standing quietly at the back, watching what they had built. He called her a visionary. She called herself a survivor who refused to stay small. Their partnership had become something sacred, rooted in purpose. One evening, as the city glowed beyond the glass, he raised a glass of tea in her honor. To the woman who turned no into ownership, she smiled, eyes soft with gratitude. Late one evening, when the building had gone quiet, she walked the halls alone, barefoot, at peace. The echoes of the past whispered faintly, but they no longer hurt. Instead, they sounded like applause. Every step she took across the polished floors felt like a conversation with her younger self. The woman who had once walked in trembling, clutching a folder full of hope. She paused near the old office door, now transformed into a public resource room, and whispered softly, "We did it." Outside, the city lights blinked back like stars bowing in acknowledgement. At dawn, she stood on the rooftop terrace as the city awoke beneath her. The wind tugged gently at her curls, while sunlight bathed the skyline in gold. She thought of her mother's prayers, Mrs. Carter's wisdom, Malik's faith, and every woman who'd ever been told she was asking for too much. The laughter that once haunted her memory now felt like distant thunder behind a clear horizon. Ownership had never been about possession. It was about presence, permanence, and purpose. As the first rays of light washed over her, she whispered, "We own our stories now."